In the mid-19th century, while science and industry in the world were developing strongly, the feudal regime in Vietnam became in crisis, seriously weakened, agriculture declined, crop failures and famine occurred. Bad things happened constantly, industry and trade stagnated, and the military was backward due to the seclusion policy of the Nguyen dynasty. The French colonialists took advantage of that opportunity to open fire and invade Vietnam. On September 1, 1858, the French-Spanish coalition with 14 warships opened fire to attack Da Nang. However, Da Nang's army and people fought back bluntly, repelling many attacks by the invaders. After 5 months of being held in Sun Tre Peninsula, the Spanish army withdrew from the invasion. France realized that it could not capture Da Nang, so it decided to send troops to attack Gia Dinh Citadel. Da Nang's army continued to resist fiercely but ultimately failed before strong French firepower. Taking advantage of the victory, the French army continued to expand its occupation around Gia Dinh as well as began building an administrative apparatus to manage the occupied area. In 1862, the Nguyen dynasty had to sign a peace treaty with France. Accordingly, Da Nang ceded 3 eastern provinces and Con Lan Island to the French army, and paid war compensation of 4 million silver coins for 10 years. By 1867, France falsely accused the Da Nang court of violating the commitments in the 1862 treaty to occupy the remaining 3 provinces of the southwestern region without a new treaty. Although the imperial court had surrendered, the uprisings of the masses continued to take place strongly. After establishing a governing apparatus in Cochin China, France continued to expand its war of aggression into the north. In 1873 and 1882, the French colonialists twice sent troops to attack Hanoi Citadel, but were repelled. Understanding that the Tonkin problem could only be resolved in Hue, the French command wanted to take advantage of the chaos that occurred. When King Tu Duc died on July 17, 1883, he attacked King Du Dai Nam. On August 18, 1883, the French fleet commanded by Admiral Cook opened fire and destroyed the Tuanan Sea flag. Da Nam's army fought back fiercely to protect King Du but failed. Faced with military pressure, the Hue court had to ask for an armistice, accept the signing of the 1883 Hoc Mong Treaty and then the 1884 Paterno Treaty. Vietnam was divided into 3 regions, the north, the middle and the south, and were evenly divided, under the protection of the French colonialists. From then on, the Nguyen government existed only in name, with no governing authority. Da Nam, after nearly 460 years of regaining independence, since the Lam Son Uprising's victory, has now lost its country and fallen into foreign hands. At the end of the war, a number of mandarins, generals of the Nguyen dynasty and patriotic scholars continued to rebel against the French, typically the Can Vuong movement initiated by King Ham Nhi and Ton That Tiet. But by the end of the 19th century, these forces were basically suppressed. Along with the invasion, France placed its rule on Vietnam, turning Vietnam into a colony to exploit resources, exploit labor and consume goods. Its consequence is of course the poverty and hunger of the people. However, a number of new elements of capitalism have appeared that also bring some benefits to Vietnam, such as roads, traffic, means of transport, communications, mines, cities, and customs. Port. Also during this period, France cut off many lands of our country for the Qing dynasty, Laos, and Cambodia, and also annexed some areas into Vietnamese territory. On February 3, 1930, the Communist Party of Vietnam was born, an organization leading the people of the country to stand up against invaders and gain independence for the nation. In 1940, Japan attacked French Indochina as part of World War II, and the French quickly surrendered. The Japanese army kept the French ruling apparatus intact to suppress reform and suppress the revolutionary movement. In 1941, Nguyen Ai Quoc returned to Vietnam after 30 years of going abroad to find a way to save the country, directly leading the revolution from Bac Bo. In March 1945, a Japanese coup overthrew the French protectorate government. Immediately afterwards, a blind government with King Bao Dai and Prime Minister Tran Trong Kim was established, naming the country the Empire of Vietnam. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced its surrender to the Allies, ending World War II. Taking advantage of that opportunity, Viet Minh forces led by President Ho Chi Minh successfully carried out the August Revolution, seizing power in most provinces and cities. King Bao Dai announced his abdication, ending thousands of years of feudalism in Vietnam. On September 2, 1945, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam was declared established by President Ho Chi Minh with its capital being Hanoi. The newly born Democratic Republic of Vietnam had to face countless difficulties and challenges in building a revolutionary government, eliminating hunger and corruption, overcoming financial difficulties, and fighting against foreign invaders, internal rebellion. The armies of allied countries in the name of the Japanese army flocked into Vietnam. On September 23, 1945, with the help of the British Army, the French colonialists attacked Saigon, opening the Second War of Invasion of Vietnam. After that, the French army continued to capture many important areas in the south and south-central regions. The government and President Ho Chi Minh are determined to lead the resistance, mobilizing forces throughout the country to support the south and central regions. Tens of thousands of young people enthusiastically join the army and join the armies advancing to the south. After occupying the cities in the south and south-central, France carried out a plan to march to the north to annex Vietnam. At that time, the north still had 200,000 Republic of China troops stationed, in the name of disarming the Japanese army. The French colonialists negotiated with the Republic of China government. Sent troops to the north to replace the Chinese army in the task of rescuing the Japanese army. Faced with the risk of having to deal with many enemies at the same time, the government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam advocated peace, agreeing to send 15,000 French troops to the north to station at designated points and help the people for a period of 5 years, thereby creating conditions for Vietnam to buy more time to consolidate its forces and prepare for the inevitable nationwide resistance war. Despite signing a preliminary agreement and provisional agreement in 1946, the French colonialists still stepped up preparations for war to invade Vietnam once again. France continuously provokes and launches attacks on us in all three regions. Faced with that situation, the government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam decided to launch a nationwide resistance war. On December 19, 1946, the resistance war against the French colonialists broke out. In the cities north of the 16th parallel, Vietnamese troops attacked, surrounded and destroyed many enemies. Along with that, the people in the south and south-central regions stepped up guerrilla warfare, intercepted the enemy on traffic routes, and destroyed logistics facilities. After 2 months of fighting, party and government agencies withdrew from Hanoi and moved to the Viet Bach base. In March 1947, the French government decided to carry out a plan to attack the Viet Bach base to quickly end the war. France mobilized 12,000 troops and most of the aircraft in Indochina, launching an attack on Viet Bach from October 7, 1947. On all fronts, Vietnamese soldiers and people fought heroically, gradually repelling the attack of military law. After more than 2 months of fighting, the battle ended with the withdrawal of the majority of French troops from Viet Bach. On December 19, with this victory, Vietnam's resistance headquarters was preserved, and the main force increasingly matured. Since the victory over Viet Bach in the fall and winter of 1947, the resistance war of the Vietnamese people has had some additional advantages. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was born. In 1950, China, the Soviet Union and other socialist countries recognized and established diplomatic relations with the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. On the enemy side, the United States agreed to provide economic and military aid to France to gradually intervene deeply in the war in Indochina. With the approval of the U.S., France proposed the Rovers Plan, establishing an east-west corridor defense system from Haiphong, passing through Hanoi, Hoa Binh to Son La. On that basis, France prepared a plan for a second large-scale attack on Viet Bach. That situation made the party and government decide to open a border campaign to open the road to China and strengthen the Viet Bach base. On September 16, 1950, the Vietnamese army opened fire to open the campaign with a battle at Dong Quai. After more than 2 days of fighting, Dong Quai stronghold was completely destroyed, the French army in Cao Bang and that Quai was threatened. Faced with the risk of having their entire army destroyed, France was forced to withdraw from these 2 bases and follow Route 4 to return to Hanoi. On the way to flee, the French army was constantly ambushed and pursued by the Vietnamese army. Meanwhile, the enemy's march to Taiwan was also blocked by the Vietnamese army. After more than a month of fighting, the border campaign ended successfully, liberating the area from the highlands to the plateau with 350,000 people. The Verve plan was bankrupt, the path of communication with socialist countries was opened. From the end of 1950 to 1953, the Army of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam continuously launched attacks in the Midlands and Northern Delta, pushing France into a deep retreat to cope. Typically, the Hoa Binh and Winter-Spring campaigns of 1951 to 1952 completely liberated the Hoa Binh and Song Da areas with 150,000 people. The Northwest Campaign, Fall-Winter 1952 liberated the areas of Sun La, Lai Chau, Yen Bay with 250,000 people. In the Upper Laos Campaign, Spring-Summer 1953, the Vietnam-Laos Coalition liberated the provinces of Sam Nua, Sing Quang and Phan Sali of Laos with more than 300,000 people. Along with the northern battlefield, in the central and southern battlefields, the Vietnamese army and people waged guerrilla warfare, draining the enemy's manpower and infrastructure. Increasingly heavy losses. By 1953, France was eliminated from the fighting with 390,000 troops, spending more than 2,000 billion francs, and the occupied area was increasingly narrowed. Faced with a bogged-down situation and imminent defeat, the French government appointed General Nava as Commander-in-Chief of the French Expeditionary Force in Indochina. Nava created a 2-step plan hoping to win in 18 months. The first step is to attack and pacify the Free Zone of Central and Southern Indochina. The second step is to transfer forces to the north, trying to win a decisive victory to end the war. The French colonialists sent 12 more infantry battalions to Vietnam, and asked the U.S. for more military aid. Responding to the enemy's plans, from winter 1953 to spring 1954, Vietnam launched a series of offensive campaigns in almost all Indochina battlefields, eliminating tens of thousands of enemy troops from the battlefield, liberating Lai areas, Chau, Con Tum and many areas in Upper and Central Laos. In December 1953, the Politburo of the Vietnam Party Central Committee met and decided to open the Dien Bien Phu campaign. On May 7, 1954, the Vietnamese army attacked the enemy headquarters, capturing General de Castries and the entire French staff. The Dien Bien Phu campaign ended successfully. The Dong Xuan tactical offensive in 1953 and 1954 and the victorious Dien Bien Phu campaign eliminated 128,000 enemies from battle, captured and destroyed many weapons, and liberated large areas throughout the country.